everybody. So, welcome to the special meeting of the Long Beach Town Council. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance to that flag behind me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all. Justice for all.
Cool. All right. So, the point of this meeting is to try and set some priorities because the town is going to be facing some decreased revenues due to this coronavirus. And so, I guess to start off, we probably ought to hear from Carl. I know you sent off a thing, and I sent it to the town council and the members of the Budget and Finance Committee so that they could kind of review that. But Carl, do you want to go over that with us so we have some idea of what we're facing?
Sure. If each of you have that Excel spreadsheet or if you printed it out, we'll start at the top on the major revenues, and I'll give an overview where I think things are going to maybe be problematic for the town. Property taxes. The governor in his executive order has extended the payment of property, real and personal property taxes until July 10th. I'm sure Bill will be sending a letter to the county treasurer requesting a May distribution for whatever monies are collected in May, and that'll help. It's just really a timing on property taxes. So what we're hearing is folks that have escrows for their home mortgages, they're still going to be required to make payment by May 10th. But for many businesses and homeowners that do not have an escrow account, they have the option to defer payment until July 10th without any penalty. So what that probably means is we'll get our property taxes late, which will be in August. Now, the only concern that we will have for the year is those residents who may be out of work and who cannot afford to pay their property taxes at all this year, may be electing to put food on the table for their families. So what would that uncollectible rate be? And I don't think any of us really have a clear sense. I would say probably you could budget 5 to 10%. Just to be conservative. But in reviewing what Bill had sent me, the town does have healthy fund balances in many of its funds, including the general fund. So I think you can weather some of the delayed payments of property taxes. Would you agree, Bill?
Yes. Okay. In the past, they have always sent whatever money they've collected, they've sent the town share of that money. So we always get more money in June than we do in December. So those of us who pay our taxes in full at the beginning of the year in May, they do give us the full complement of the town's portion.
Yep, and I believe that would continue. It's just that if people are out of work or having financial crisis, they may elect to defer until July, which may mean we don't collect that until August. But so we may have a little shortfall for the year, but I don't think it's going to be major. So the next category, yes.
Carl, Nick Meyer here, just a clarification question. So where you have in that spreadsheet list of property taxes, the 671, is that what our expected annual revenue would be, or is that an adjusted number? What you thought it might be less some percentage?
No, that's 100%, and then that's even before the circuit breaker credits. So after the DLGF applies the 1%, 2%, 3% tax caps, there's a $42,000 projected tax cap loss that we will not collect, the taxpayers' benefit. So we're anticipating on collecting at 100%, $629,538.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on down, auto excise, commercial vehicle excise taxes. Those are smaller revenues. And a portion from what your residents pay gets just, goes into LaPorte County and they distribute it, and our portion is there. I don't anticipate a significant change there unless people stop buying, newer cars, and that amount could go down a little. Let's jump down to the local income taxes, also referred to as LIT, the certified shares. So that would be the CADGET amount that the town receives from the county. I would envision you'll collect that full amount this year. This is kind of based on the state's budget year. And so it's always a look back period. So I would think through probably the rest of this year, we'll collect $166,809. If folks' incomes are down, this first 6 months of this year, that may affect what we're going to collect then beginning in 21. I don't know how much that will be, but you may want to plan that could start decreasing by 10 to 20%, just to be safe.
Carl?
Yes?
Yeah, this is Bill. I have noticed that in years past, the CADGET and SEDIT come together. They're put into separate funds, but right now it's a little over $30,000. And I realize that every month it is exactly the same amount for CADGET and SEDIT, which makes me think that it is already money that they've booked and they're sending it, because there is no adjustment at all. What you're saying is that's probably the way that it's distributed, right?
Yes. So the rest of this year, I think we're safe. So I think when they calculate the new amount for next year, it could go down for 21. Okay. But obviously we don't know what the collection, the revenue shortfall. I don't even think the state of Indiana knows, other than they're not collecting as much money right now. Cable TV licenses, I don't envision that changing. I would anticipate you collect probably the same amount. Wouldn't you, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Likewise, police protection contracts and service fees, those are by your agreements, correct?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Building permits, that potentially could go down in the interim if people are obviously delaying major projects. That could go down a little, but then maybe it picks up come June, July, if the order is given to allow people to start working again. Other receipts, just some miscellaneous revenue. There's also rental income that the town collects. So general fund, other than the certified shares, I don't think you're going to be impacted significantly this year. Next year could be a different story. Let's move on to the next two funds, local road and street, LR&S, and motor vehicle highway. Those are funded, at least local road and street is 100% by the gasoline tax. MVH, you still have a significant amount that's funded through property taxes. So again, that's just a timing thing. You do receive about $47,600 in gasoline tax. Beginning in 2019, the General Assembly had passed a bill saying that half of the gas money from the MVH fund has to go to a separate MVH restricted account or fund, and that's to be used for paving or making capital improvements to your roads, streets and roads. I'm assuming the motor vehicle gasoline tax is going to start to go down probably at a significant amount right now, because gas prices are down and people aren't driving right now. For budgeting, maybe you just assume it's a 50% reduction. Now,
Carl, can I ask one question?
sure.
You said 50% of the MVH taxes. Is that 50% of that whole column at the bottom, or just 50%?
No, the 47,600.
50% of that number is what has to be spent on the roads.
On capital expenditures or paving.
Right.
And Bill actually has a separate account that he does transfer that money to. I know I have some cities and towns are thinking about, because of the emergency, they're going to be short paying their, the street department folks just to operate, and they may forego making that transfer. I don't have clarity on that yet, but that's something, if it's a significant number, obviously 50% of 47,000 isn't a big number. You're talking a little over 22,000, but
we can do anything we want with the MVH funds other than the 47.6?
Well, they have to be spent on the street department.
The whole column?
Yes. And Bill, that pretty much, aren't you funding pretty much your street department operations out of MVH? Are you doing some capital improvements?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the expenditures we want is paving, and that obviously is an area that we will have to pay from that and CCD.
Okay. All right, the next column would be Park and Recreation. I'm assuming you're not collecting a lot of park rental fees right now because of the COVID-19, so that 15,000 number could go down, but it's not a significant number to the total of your budget, but just something to be aware of.
Yeah, on that for the council and Carl, that I believe if we cancel the summer program, we actually make money because it's never been a profit maker. So we always pay more for the counselors than we do for the income that we draw in. So it's actually, a wash. If we lose that, we actually gain a little bit. But it's sad because it's worth the $10,000 or $1,000 that we spend on that program. But it looks like we may not be able to run that program.
Sure. Okay, CCD, again, the majority of the funds out of CCD is through property taxes. So again, it's just a timing of when we'll receive the money, but you should get the majority of the funds this year.
Carl, can you go back to when you talked on the MVH, when you talked about some communities are shorting the workers or something? What did you say about that?
I'm saying that they may, they haven't actually done this yet. We're just kind of exploring if you're in a bind. Do you forego transferring half of the 47.6 into the restricted MVH account?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're in much better shape than most communities. You have a significant amount of your funding for the street department is through property taxes. Many communities are almost totally reliant on the gasoline tax. But, we don't collect a lot just because, again, the number of miles of roads that we have in town of Long Beach is a small amount compared to other communities. Okay, moving on then to the other local income tax fund, which is your CEDIT. That's the County Economic Development Income Tax Fund. We're scheduled to collect $197,803. You divide that by 12, and that's pretty much what Bill's receiving every month now. I think you'll be safe on that money coming in regularly between now and the end of the year. I don't.
Is there? Hey, Carl, it's Meyer again here on the seeded funds. Is there any risk? And maybe this is a Chris question as well, but could the county get creative at all if others are having budgetary shortfalls or challenges, and somehow money that would be otherwise due to us somehow creatively gets taken from us? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think they're allowed to do that. I think that would be really an audit exception to the county if they tried to do that. I'm not aware of any provision in the law that allows them to reallocate those funds that are designated for Long Beach. But again, you may discover in 21 and 22 that we may have some reductions in the seeded money, just because if income goes down for LaPorte County and people are out of work, they're not going to collect as much of the local income taxes. But I would say for the rest of this year, you're going to be fine with those funds. And I think, Bill, you have allocated a significant amount of money out of this account for your matching on the community crossing road improvement projects.
Right. And I didn't think my brain shut down. I didn't think about sending a copy of the MVH budgets to the Council on Budget and Finance, but that also has another $50,000 that was budgeted for paving in there too. And
in MVH?
Out of MVH.
Okay.
H restricted, is we only want to use that for paving.
Right. So maybe that's a good reason not to reduce the amount that gets transferred.
Yeah.
And so it's very possible. I think you still had cash in that MVH restricted account too, that you could actually probably spend down if you needed to.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's intended. That would be part of the
Sure.
Part of the 30,000 that we would put to paving.
Okay, so the last fund, again, these are the major funds that I'm kind of looking at, is the Riverboat Fund. And your Riverboat revenues were budgeted for this year at 63,000. Obviously, the boats have been closed since middle of March, probably through June.
Right.
I'm not sure if they'll reopen in May, but you may want to consider they'll be closed through June. And then how soon will people be comfortable going back onto the boats, especially Blue Chip or any of them for gaming, when you're in close quarters with other people? I don't know what my crystal ball or what yours looks like, but I would say figure at least 50% reduction there. Maybe more.
Typically, we get $100,000 a year, and the first payment is usually a little over 60, and the second payment is 39. So I don't know if that's tied to gambling in the first part of the year or not, or whether I'm getting send that money. But I, if you
maybe we just were conservative in budgeting the revenue when we did the budget this year.
But typically, we could figure $8,000 a month, and so every month that we're down, we should expect that we'll get none of that money. Yeah. So
your budget expenditures there, Bill, is $126,000. The difference you would have available in the cash fund balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
You're saying that we typically get over 100, Bill?
About 100.
Okay.
We get about 100 total in the year from the riverboat.
So 63 is a reasonable number then, isn't it, Carl?
It should be. That's more like 63%, but we're guessing right now. But again, as Bill said, he does have cash that I think he could fund 126,000.
Well, I'm confused. If we're saying we get 100, why are we saying, I don't understand that bottom end of this sheet.
So I didn't show like the shortfall of what, if your expenditures are greater than your revenues, you're funding it through the fund balance, and you're allowed to do that. It's just once you spend it, it's gone until you have years where you have surplus revenues coming in over expenditures.
One quick question about the CCD funds. What was your percentage that you thought that would be down? That's the third column from the right.
Again, that's almost exclusively, other than auto excise taxes, property taxes. So again, maybe between 5 and 10% uncollectible rate of the 226. But I believe, again, the town has significant cash that you could probably spend the majority of those funds and still, obviously, this is a big year for doing a lot of the paving projects. So you are going to be spending some of your cash fund balances down. But what the benefit you're getting is you're getting 80% grant money to do a lot of road paving projects. Getting free money and paying 20% is a pretty good deal. But you're going to be starting to drain some of the fund balances down. But presuming you don't spend at this level every year, you'll have a chance to rebuild your balances, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Just to understand these numbers then, if I add that bottom line where you say net revenue by fund, roughly 500,000, are you saying that that's what we're going to be down this year?
Okay, I did that calculation for you. So what Carl did, I just added up each of the columns where Carl had total budgeted revenue and budgeted expenditures. Let's say for the general fund over on the left, we have a net revenue deficit of 87,924. So summing those across for each column, we basically have a net revenue deficit that we budgeted for of 496,455. So what is necessary, and I had sent out the individual spreadsheets, the budget sheets, the adopted budget sheets for each of these funds, and I highlighted on those areas that are potentially significant areas of discretionary expense. So for example, when obviously with MVH and stuff like that, there's significant monies for paving. Each one of these things should be looked at so that we don't get ahead of our skis on anything. So we had obviously anticipated that we would be doing a lot of development this year, which is why we have basically a 496, 455 deficit. And if we were to continue on that path, we would eat into the significant cash balance that we have of, I think Bill indicated 1.87 million or something like that. So it's obviously not something we can do year to year, but these individual accounts need to be evaluated to say, what have we got in for an expense, a budgeted item, and what are we really going to spend? For example, I can't remember exactly where we've got it, but in one of these funds, we have $80,000 tagged for fire department, either truck or building. We have to consider, are we going to do that? Because the way we budgeted, we allowed placeholders to do that. Now we have to get down to the nitty gritty on this and say, okay, what are the things we're going to hold back on here? Because if we were to expend just the way we are, forgetting about what Carl had indicated here on potential lost revenue for the year, we would be running a significant budget deficit for the current year. And obviously we can't continue that forever, and we didn't plan to, but.
Pete, can I ask you one question before you keep going? So this sheet that we're looking at that has your yellow highlighted net revenue by fund.
Yep.
That's got a minus of roughly $500,000.
Right.
That does not reflect any of these 10 and 50% and 10% COVID impacts then. You're saying
right.
we budgeted with that negative in there?
Yes, we did. And that was because over the years we had built up a significant surplus, cash surplus in the various funds. So this was the year that we were going to catch up and start doing some of those. One of the prior things we didn't do, let's say for last year, was we didn't spend all we were going to spend for Stop 24. That was carried forward into here. So what you're getting at is we have to look at each one of these individual funds, look at the expense items, and I'd send everybody a spreadsheet showing what is budgeted by fund, by line item, and then identify what we're going to spend. So that's a council decision on how we go forward here.
So it sounds like we need to decide what our priorities are and
Exactly.
pare things down a little bit. As I see the issues, we've got the community crossing grant, and that looks like an expenditure of $333,000. Plus, I believe, Pete, there's $100,000 management fee that we have to pay the engineers for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's $430,000. We have Stop 24. We haven't put that out to bid yet. We have Stop 15. We got turned down on the grant for that, so I think that definitely goes off the list. We have Stops 21 and 23, where if we don't do something, we're going to lose Lakeshore Drive. But we don't know how much that's going to cost. Now,
And we did not budget anything for it.
right, so we need to consider that. We've got the fire station and fire truck, although most of that was, I think, going to be a bond issue. But we need to think about that. And so I think those are the big issues, the big items. Has anybody else got any other big items we need to think about?
Well, I think just important, Bob, to go through the spreadsheets for each of the funds and look at the line items and see what's there. We don't need to do that now, but that's basically, what we have to do, because we still have, as we showed here, our budgeted net deficit without, as John indicated, without any decrease in the revenue fund. We have budgeted for the 1 year, this year, a $496,000 deficit.
Right.
So when we leave this meeting, we have to convene. Go
One
ahead.
quick point, Pete. So if I use this sheet that we have in front of us,
Yes.
that Carl just went through,
Yep.
and I adjust, and you've got this negative $500,000 from, basically built-in budget. I'm not going to say deficit, but a negative. But if we adjust the property taxes in the general fund column and the Cadget and the motor vehicle by 50% and the CCD by 10%, there's another $250,000 there, roughly speaking, that's actually going to be in the negative column over and above this 500. If we call the COVID ramifications for 2020 somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000.
Plus, we have an unbudgeted expense that we know of, which is going to be the protection of Lakeshore Drive at stops 21 and 23. And just as a background, what we've seen for the homes that are down there, those 7 homes that had to have their seawalls repaired, they're experiencing to repair those seawalls anywhere from $270,000 to $330,000 per home for theirs. And we've got 2 stops to protect, as well as Stop 21 is a little bit more than 1 stop because we've got the beach club that we would have to arrange. So everything you're saying is right. But the unbudgeted expense of, I would imagine, and I don't know this right now, but we're in $200,000 to protect stops 21 and 23 at least. So we got to get a better number on that. So that's why I say we need to look at each of the individual funds and say, what are we really going to spend in here? And then we'll be comfortable, and we'll have to make a decision, how much do we want to deplete the current surplus?
Can I ask you a question, Joe? I haven't heard anything about sewers. Are you guys talking about any expenditures for the sewers this year?
Well, what we've done is, what I've asked is, no, we have not. Not anything in massive, because that would be a SRF fund. The only inquiry we're doing is having Haas contact SRF to see if there's any potential withholding or drawback on that SRF funding capability. I just don't know the answer to that. But we have not budgeted anything, nor did we expect to spend much more than what we've already spent. The sanitary district is going to pick up all the engineering fees and all that kind of stuff. But it's possible if SRF pulls back, then we have to decide, is there an alternate source of funds for that? And who would pay the balances? But that right now, I see that almost as a non-issue at this point.
So this is Nick. I have a question on and this would be a Bill, Carl, or Pete question. But when we look at the budget for this year, we've budgeted for more than what's in there, right? But we knew we had a surplus. So if our total funditures for the entire town, we had enough to cover the 400,000, call it 500,000 in our surplus. What is the total surplus picture?
Well, you can, if you look at the budgeted revenue line of, at this time, 2,131,000, that obviously includes, that's money that's going to be coming in. We're sitting with a cash position of about $1.8 million. So if we were to go along with just this without any kind of reductions for COVID, we would reduce that $1.8 million surplus to somewhere around $1.4 million, something like that, maybe $1.3 million.
But this year, the 2020 year, we're taking advantage of prior years not spending the full amount, or there's other timing issues, whatever, that we've got some things that we're spending against this year. What 2021, 2022, how does 21 and 22 look compared to 2020? Do we expect to spend considerably more than what we had in a budgeted year for 21 and 22?
Carl, I'll let you answer that one.
We did put together some fund projections. It was done really last fall. We were looking kind of through October, because I'm anticipating a significant amount of capital expenditures in 2020. And I know Pete had asked us to put those together, and we did. We have not updated those projections since then, but they did go out to like 23, assuming modest increases in some revenues and some expenditures. What we probably should do, if you're interested, we probably should update for actual expenditures through the end of 2019. And then you would see what the fund balances, surpluses were in each of these major funds, and then maybe go through this exercise for 20 through 23 now and make some adjustments for the COVID-19. Maybe that would help you if you saw it on these spreadsheets updated to kind of see where we're going. Now we would have to make some assumptions as to what kind of community crossing grant levels you want to fund in 21, 22, and 23. But that's something we could do fairly quickly, and maybe turn it around in 2-3 weeks, and you guys could take a look at that to help you make decisions for future years, or even the rest of this year.
But the first step is to go through the current budget items.
Yes.
And highlight those things we will not spend, because obviously some of those things would be pushed forward to future years. So we got to do step one first.
We do, but the reason for my question was in order to make some of those decisions this year to push off. I'll use Stop 24 for example. It's $100,000 grant, matching grant that we have, and we have until July 2021 to spend it. Obviously, the things that we're talking about here are more important than that. Things like protecting the lakeshore, a loss of revenue from taxes. I mean, we have to pay our employees. All of those things definitely outweigh improvements to Stop 24. But that being said, if there's a way that we know in outlying years we may not be spending as much and we could absorb some of that this year, it just kind of changes the lens on how we look at some of those individual budgetary items for this year.
No, you're right. But we need to get more precise in the out years for things like vehicles and that sort of stuff, and community center advances and that sort of thing. So our immediate problem is really, and I'll admit, when we did the budget for this year, although we show 496, 450, 455 deficit, there are substantial areas of fluff in there, put it that way. So we can easily meet some of these things, but we have to decide now what it is. And as Carl indicated, we don't know truly what's going to happen in out years with these revenues, nor do we know, for example, with the community crossing grant, this may be the last year that any community crossing grant funds are available, given where those funds come from. So I think it's a doable situation. I don't think we're in trouble. We just have to be sensible.
And this is Coker here. Have we looked to see what Stop 21 and 23 potential engineering costs or construction costs are going to be to shore up the lakefront? I mean, we got all these people here now tearing up the place. I mean, this would be the time to do it, or we're going to put it off, or how are we going to handle that?
Yeah, you're right. We have to get a better handle on that. We don't have a good handle on that at this time.
Yeah, we haven't, the plan is to put a revetment in, and so we really can't compare it to the seawalls that are getting put in because it's a whole different type of procedure. But the story is...
Are we going forward with some estimates or contractors or?
Woodruff is the plan is to have Woodruff do it. We've had difficulty getting Woodruff. We have difficulty actually getting bills from Woodruff. Getting estimates is even more difficult. But they've done a good job with the work that they've done. But I think we need to pressure them to get a number and get started on that. One of the problems is that because there are so many different properties that are having problems, that the big stones that they use for revetments are very difficult to get right now.
Yeah.
So that's created a problem. Fortunately, we haven't had a huge storm that's jeopardized our Lakeshore Drive, but obviously the sooner we do that, the better. And I think that's an expense we're just going to have to take.
Right.
And there's, just to confuse the matter a little, at Stop 21, that's a peculiar situation. We've got the town stop, which is 21, and then adjacent to that is the beach club. You can't protect one without protecting both. So we have to resolve how that's going to be handled. That's just
who owns the beach club? The adjoining owners across the street, or who owns that?
I think there's about 15 or 20 partners in that property. I may be wrong in that number, but it's certainly more than 5. And the question would be, where would they come up with money to do that? I don't know, Bob, has anybody approached them at all?
We talked to the one individual that kind of was the person that was the responsible party back when we started doing temporary repairs along the lakefront to keep the stops from falling into the lake when we were in our emergency mode. We spoke with, and his name is, Mr. Rabin is his name. We got a hold of him to get permission. Excuse me?
It's Joe. It's Joe. His first name's Joe.
Okay. We got a hold of Joe Rabin and talked to him about permission to put our temporary protection measures across the front of the Stop 21 Beach Club property. So we did get that accomplished. My personal opinion is if we're going to pay for the seawall across there, I'd say we'd need to own the lot at the end of the process.
That's what I was gonna suggest. If they're gonna do that, and we gotta pay for it, then they should either deed it over to us, or they gotta get a special assessment of all the partners to ante up some money to pay for it, one or the other.
They don't have that kind of money, I can tell you that right now.
Well, then,
They were not willing to contribute anything to the temporary. We had to do it in order to protect our
right,
property. Yeah.
well, Chris, something to look into.
Yeah, you guys just point me who's the point contact for me? Mr. Wall?
Larry Wall or John?
John, sorry, just in terms of your conversations, I mean, we can certainly, I don't know if one of you who's been in contact, but yeah, we can.
Chris, I can get you Joe's email because he's contacted the water department about some separate issues. If you want me to.
I guess the question is a point person on the town council. John, you have somewhat of a relationship with Mr. Rabin?
Well, we spoke about as I said, no sense going over spilled milk. We talked about the temporary measures. He seemed like a very nice guy. I mean, but we talked about whether they could contribute to the temporary measures, and he said there was no money available for any of that, so.
Yeah, I guess my question is just, is John the one, it makes sense for me to reach out with him and he and I can work together and then report back to collectively? Does that make sense? That's all I was asking for as a point person on the council.
Is that okay, John?
Well,
That's fine with me. Mayor, I can get his email from you. I know I've got his phone number hiding around here somewhere, but if you've got his email, that'd be good.
I do. When I go into I go in there on Thursday, I'll get his email address and send it to you.
I'll get it for you tomorrow, John.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
He pronounces it Rabin. I think it's Joe Rabin.
I think we should understand what our options are in there, because just asking people to contribute money, which is going to be substantial, is not going to get us anywhere. We need to know what is our capability, or what can we require to be done. I think that deserves some analysis before we talk to them about anything. We need to understand what's our potential position.
Yeah, I mean, what? Yeah. So what? Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Well, is this an eminent domain issue? What is it? I just threw that out. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but we need to find out what our legal position is on this.
Yeah, can we force a property owner to fix their property if Lakeshore Drive is going to be in jeopardy? And if they say no, what are our options? So maybe Chris, you can check on that.
Of course, that's all part of what I intend to, whoever's going to be the point person, and then we can discuss that, and obviously not approaching anything on behalf of the town with an option. It's collectively the council to decide that. But seemingly this is one of those matters that gets stepped up a little bit, right?
Yeah, we better do this sooner rather than later because we've been lucky so far.
Looking forward, that's another reason why, there are an awful lot of people that wish we would not have allowed the people to fix their homes along the lakefront where they had failing seawalls. But if we would have let all those properties go in, the town would have had to come up with the protection measures for the rest of the Lakeshore Drive property. So I think this is similar to that, and we can do some homework and figure that out, Pete. I agree with you. But I think realistically, unless they have a pot of money that I don't know about, we're going to have to, in order to protect our piece, we're going to have to, either that or there's no way. You absolutely have to protect their property as well to protect Lakeshore Drive.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So step 21 and 23, and I guess that needs to be resolved before we can push Woodruff to give us a estimate, because we still don't quite understand what the job is. Although I guess we can assume that we're going to have to protect both those lots at stop 21 and the one lot at 23.
I think that's right.
So we need to push Woodruff for an estimate.
We can get other contractors involved if we find that we're not having success with them.
And does that require a competitive bid situation?
Yes.
So we really,
At these prices, yes. And let's not forget, Woodruff has been very, very, very cooperative in helping us protect those properties overnight, on the weekends, whatever it takes. They were there to do it in jeopardy, in very serious situations. They've done a wonderful job. Otherwise, I believe at stop 23, Lakeshore Drive would have been compromised.
so Chris, what we need to probably do then is set up a competitive bid process and get that going. And make sure Woodruff is included on that and put it out to anybody else who's interested in doing it.
It's a catch-22, Bob. You can't ask some contractor to come down and bid on that stop 21 situation without understanding what the scope of work is. So we're going to have to come up with some sort of scope of work for both places, 21 and 23, in order to do a competitive bid process. I agree with Pete. I think it's enough money. The only reason we didn't get competitive bids on the emergency work is it was hour by hour over about, a 2-day period in order to get the thing done. This, we don't have. Luckily, we've got the luxury right now of being able to do a competitive bid game. But we're going to have to get the coastal engineer involved. We're going to have to design something. We're going to have some choices to make. There's a couple of different proprietary systems we can use, or we can go back to the rock revetment that you're talking about. But we need to define the scope before we ever start talking about and I think that's going to involve deciding what we're doing with stop 21 relative to the stop people.
Okay, so I guess I'm getting the cart before the horse then. You basically, you need to talk to 21 with Chris, then we can figure out where we go from there.
Well, I think me talking with John outside of this, and we can kick it around and report back to the council what our legal options are. But yeah, talking to Woodruff, if indeed we're not in an emergency situation and we're not around any of the exceptions, this is a competitive bid process, and it sounds like it based on tonight. It's useless to have Woodruff do anything because they may want to bid on that job, right? So I agree, John is 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Larry's had some conversation, Bob. I don't know if you heard anything, but he originally was going to have a conversation with a coastal engineer, Collins.
Yes.
And he may already have some idea what needs to be done, which would give us a jump start on what the specs would be or what the thing would be. So I'll check with Larry tomorrow.
We've got a couple of other issues, Pete, relative to where that wall is placed at both locations. I say wall, whatever revetment or whatever proprietary system we're going to use, you still have the ordinary high water mark and the proper placement. We had some job site conversations with Collins. I think it's been 3 weeks or more, or probably more than that ago. And, he wasn't sure. And we were trying to give him information so that he could help adjacent property owners that were doing private work relative to where all that should be in terms of where the ordinary high water mark is. But that's all part of this whole process.
I agree.
Have we ever had any luck getting the Corps? I know the Corps of Engineers is kind of busy these days, but would they be able to throw in some consulting engineering to tell us how we can protect our beachfront?
Frankly, Bill, the Corps of Engineers has been MIA.
Okay. Well,
Up to now, we had them, Bob and I had them here a couple of years ago and did a tour of the whole beach. And they basically said, well, a lot of this is already armored. It's not a big enough project, so we don't want to touch it.
Okay.
I think that if we get a spec on what needs to be done, I think then we can involve the Corps and the DNR involved in the actual delivery or the building of it. But right now, we just need to know what we can do at the most economical cost.
Well, given that we're all here in a meeting now, would we want to authorize Larry to talk to Collins and hire Collins Engineering to give us a plan once we know the scope of the project? Or is that premature also?
I think it's worth a while that the council should vote on something like that to give somebody to go ahead to start solving some of these problems.
We gotta get the first step going, and sooner the better, because there could be a big storm anytime.
Right. So given that we're here now, and once hopefully we resolve the issue with Stop 21, can we give, as a council, give Larry the go ahead to talk to Collins Engineering, retain them, and come up with a plan for whatever the scope is? Or is
I
that?
think we should. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to get the ball rolling. We can, concurrently, we can work with Stop 21 people, but again, the engineer can't even design anything unless he knows what the parameters are.
What he's
So-
gotta do,
right.
right?
Right, so the motion would be to allow Larry, our building commissioner, to talk to Collins Engineering once we've determined what the scope of the project is.
I think that engineer is going to help determine what the scope.
Right, the scope definition that'll run concurrently, yeah. But again, they can't fly blind. So I think Chris and I'll work on the Stop 21 guys. And then at the same time, we can get Collins down there, tromp through the thing, both locations. He's already very familiar with both locations.
Right.
So it's a question of, I think you're in the right, you got your foot in the right camp here. We need to make some sort of an authorization to proceed with, I'm assuming Larry, my brother, thinks that those guys are competent. Pete, I think you do too, don't you, Collins?
Well, Larry certainly thinks they're competent. I've not met with them, but Larry's been right so far.
Yeah, Larry's been very impressed with them, he told me.
So
I guess we need to make that.
Authorize that, I think, and that's fine. And then Chris and I will work on the other issue, and then we'll have to have some subcommittee meetings or something in order to keep the thing moving.
All right, I'd like to second that motion. That is to talk to, we just got to make sure we get this in writing.
Who made the motion?
John made a motion to allow Larry to talk to Collins Engineering.
Okay,
And, obviously, I'm sure they're not going to do that for free. But once we have the scope of the project defined, then hopefully they can get going. I think the sooner we do this, the better, before we have a big storm.
okay.
This is Nick. I mean, we're going to have to solve it at some point in time. And to Bill's question earlier about Army Corps, I know he mentioned it, but I just looked up the Beverly Shores issues, and I mean, they've tried to, even in their emergency situation, they've tried to reach out to Army Corps, and both Army Corps and the National Park both opposed additional rock revetments or any kind of protective measures. So they've already tried to go down that path, and even the Army Corps themselves they did not want to see a permit issued. So I don't think they're going to be any help in this case either. So, but yeah, I agree. We're going to have to solve this at some point.
So Collins is the one who would basically, after we give them the direction that we want to protect Lakeshore Drive and other minor things, Collins would be the one, a coastal engineer, to develop the spec. Similar to what Edgewater's done for private property owners, Collins would be the one who would develop the spec for this project. It would include 21 and 23, and both lots on 23. And then Chris is going to have to decide or figure out what is our leverage with 23. What do we have to do to make that happen?
But 21, you mean?
21.
21 and 23.
Right, but
21 in particular, right, John?
2 lots is 21.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Was that an aye from everybody?
Yes.
Anybody nay? Okay. All right, so basically we've got a plan then for Stop 21 and 23. I think like Peter, I believe, mentioned that community crossing grant may disappear years down the road. I do have it on good authority that it's not going to decrease this year, however. So we can get the full almost $1 million from the state for that if we agree to proceed. Now, I've got a contract with INDOT that needs to be signed within 3 months. I guess I'd like to make that decision to get that signed now, get that back to them. It's a little bit involved. They send some instructions that require attestations, and I'm not sure exactly what we need to do with all that. Chris, is that signing that as difficult as it seems to be with what they stated?
Yeah, we just got to make sure that we follow. They're pretty particular, so we don't want to, and I can work with you on that agreement just to make sure we go down that checklist. It's clear. There's just a lot there and not the normal just putting your name down. So
if I print that up and bring it into you, we can get that done?
we'll get it sent away. Mhm.
Okay, but obviously we need to give permission to do that. Now, this is talking about spending $330,000, but we get $1 million. So it's a pretty good deal. Now, we also have to spend $100,000 just about for the engineering firm to supervise the project. So we're really talking $430,000. But from what I'm hearing tonight, it sounds like, we're gonna, if we do this, we're gonna blow through some of our surplus. But if we don't do this, next year we may not have the opportunity to pave our roads, or we may not have our opportunity to pave our roads next year. So we probably need to do what we can this year, especially given the 3-to-1 grant.
Yeah, I think the thing we need to do is go to the individual line items for each budget for each thing and identify the things we're not going to spend. Because if we do that properly, then we won't necessarily have to encounter this deficit for this year. So we need to look at the line items for each fund and say what we're going to spend and what we're not going to spend.
Okay.
And then I think
make one comment, Bob, relative to the community grant funds.
Yeah.
There are some timeline implications, not just that the contract has to be back within 3 months, but reasonably, Haas has to do some engineering. That I'm looking at that document that you're referring to when he talks about 120,000 for what you said a minute ago was, basically watching over the project. But he has some design work that has to go on before we actually can proceed with the bidding process.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke with him a couple of days ago, Tim Haas. You have to start with your drop dead date when you're going to lose the money, which essentially would be that 3 months out that you mentioned, and then work back with things like the design and the bid process. So those involve multiple weeks of time. Like a bid process reasonably has got to be about a month. The design's got to be about a month. So realistically, I just want to make sure we understand that we can't, if we decide we want to go ahead with this, we really can't let too much time lapse. The other thing that happens is, in terms of maximizing your dollars, the paving guys are going to be busy at a certain point. So if we wait until August to start trying to proceed, you can knock some of the money into next year, and that's your safety valve. But reasonably, we can't wait a couple of months in order to get the process going, if we want to do it. I agree with Pete, what Pete's saying, though. We do need to get through the line items. I will say it's going to be a little tough to, are you anticipating trying to do that tonight, Pete?
No, but I mean, everybody seems to be in agreement that the crossing grant money is needed. I think the only thing that, from my perspective on the contract, we want to make sure that if for some reason something untoward happens between now and the time we have to commit to this, that we can scale it back. Instead of spending 330, we might want to spend 250 and get the bonus. I don't anticipate that, but I think that's something we should have in there. And the other thing is, I believe that we can go through these line items and we can get it down to such a way that we will greatly diminish the amount of deficit that we have. I have no doubt about that.
We don't have to spend all of that community grant money either. We can scale the project back if we so choose.
Right.
And can we do that even after we sign this document? Because it had numbers on it.
Yes, you can do that. You can actually do that after the award. If you had your contractor in hand, you can actually reduce it at that point too, is what Haas explained to me. I didn't realize that, but I guess we can.
And John, have you, a substantial portion of the 110,000 or something that Haas is wanting to charge, last time when we did this, a substantial portion of that was for them supervising the work as it was going in. you're happy with everything that's proposed there? It's worth the dollars, all that kind of stuff. Is there anything? But
Well,
you don't have to answer that now, but we need to understand,
Yeah, no, I know where you're going, Pete. I actually had some conversation with Tim. Of that 120, he's got a $72,000 line item for administration inspections. He thought we may be able to trim that back depending on who the contractor was and what the ultimate scope of work was. So it's a little bit like your budget numbers. He's got a little bit of fluff in there. I don't think you're going to see that knocked in half, but there may be some tens of thousands potentially.
Okay.
Well, so given the fact that we can decrease those numbers, that is with the community crossing people and perhaps with Haas, do you guys want to give me permission to sign this so we can start going through that process so that at least us signing this document isn't going to delay this?
Yeah, I think we should go forward with it. I mean, this is Coker here.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the sooner the better on that too.
Yeah, that provided that is in fact the case, that if we sign that it doesn't lock us into paying that. I can't imagine that a matching grant is going to be upset if you spend less. So, but provided we can do that, okay, we can do that too.
Yeah, and in fact, John Wall confirmed we can cut it back.
But we have to test that we're willing to come up with $330,000 plus engineering, because we can't charge any of the engineering to I mean, we have to spend $330,000 on paving to get $1 million more. And
Right.
so I think that's something that I'd like to see you at least approve. We can always go backwards and take things out, but I think we have enough money that in our bank account to cover all of this expense to do the whole 1.33 million worth of paving.
This is Coker again, but can any of that paving be utilized for the Lakeshore Drive on the sewer project?
You have to spend the CCG money within that period, John. I don't see the sewers being completed quick enough for this particular community grant fund
Right.
letting, but it possibly, if the sewers are done next year, I'm not sure what the timeline is on the sewers. You won't.
Ideally, they would start in September and be done by next end of next May, but that's optimistic.
You won't be able to. So what? Just to further clarify, when we go after this community grant project, the way the Indiana Department of Transportation funds this, you have to present to them exactly what you're doing before you get the money.
Right.
We cannot even change the length of the road that we're paving on the list of roads that we gave them. That's how tight their grant criteria are.
Yeah, and I think it's set in the exhibits to the agreement. It lays out the dollar amount, the estimated dollar amounts, and the roads that are to be done. It doesn't, just to throw a curveball in here, it doesn't mean that something can't be amended, but I wouldn't plan on it. The contract provides that there could be amendments, but I would not rely on that. I think that what you see is what you get here. So I don't disagree with Bill that if you guys are going to approve, you're approving this contract as proposed. And then if you later decide to scale back and spend less, that's a different story.
John, John Coker, I'd be happy to show you everything, and then you can kind of understand a little better.
Yeah, I was just trying to piggyback tearing up Lakeshore Drive and having some of this grant money, so that would be less of a cost, capital cost on the sewers. So
Tom Dolph can correct me if I'm wrong, but they purposely left Lakeshore Drive out of this round of community grant awards so that we didn't have that duplication and or tearing up brand new pavement to put in the sewers.
Right. Okay.
But the repaving of Lakeshore Drive will be included in the sewer project, right?
Right.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be nice if some of this money could be used to pay for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too late now. Right.
I make a motion that we have Bob go ahead and proceed on the community crossing grant.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Cool, all right, so we took care of that. I don't know that we want to necessarily get into any of the other items that we've decided to put off. I think we're already biting off quite a bit. I think we've accomplished, as far as I can tell, everything that I had in mind. Anybody else have anything we think we need to talk about this evening?
I guess we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan for going through the line items in the budget.
Do we want to do that at a budget and finance meeting?
We can make recommendations in there.
I'd be comfortable with if the budget and finance made recommendations, but what it would be helpful to see is just a line item specifically like this expenditure was for this particular project. So like if Stop 24 is one of those that's recommended, just, you know, a little sentence description on what the expenditure was.
Mm-hmm. So, Pete, we got a budget and finance meeting coming up. Can this wait till next month?
I'll get something out on this.
Well, we could have a meeting anytime we want. We just have
Right.
don't have to announce a meeting if it's other than the second Wednesday, but we have a meeting on the fourth Thursday, as long as we give enough notice.
All right, so Pete, you want to tell me when you think you're ready to go and we can get it announced?
Yeah, we'll do it at the next budget meeting. What I'll do is I will highlight, I've already highlighted areas of consideration. And if Bill can then identify the specific items that we've budgeted in those line items, then we can present those at the budget meeting and talk about those.
Okay. And then also, I guess at the same time, we can look and see where we're going to adversely affect our budgetary surplus, because undoubtedly we're going to do that some. But right. Bill, you should be able to show us that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe, I just wanted to make sure at bus stop 23, we have maybe the opposite issue because they're selling that house on the east side of bus stop 23, which is on part of our property. And how is that going to work when we go to put in some kind of revetment or whatever for bus stop 23? Are we going to go on our property where they have their stairs and everything else?
So, yeah, I've talked to Chris about that. And so I guess, Chris, we need to probably move that up the agenda list also, because we do have the issue at 23 also. They have stairs that go down from their patio, which is on town property. I don't know that we want to remove their patio, but I think we certainly want their stairs out of there, and we want to reclaim as much of that stop as we can practically do.
Their septic's also on town property, isn't it?
Yes, and that also has been part of the discussion. So I guess, Chris, we need to come up with a plan for what we're going to present to that property owner, so we can proceed. So we've just been coming up with all kinds of stuff for you to do tonight.
Because that house is up for sale now, isn't it, Bob?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And that's what actually brought it to mind. So the park board has already been concerned about that. They brought it to me and I brought it to Chris. So sounds like we need to just get that moving too so we can fix that stop. So both stops have issues.
Do we have a survey that shows the property and where all these things sit?
Yes. In fact, we own about 2 feet of their driveway also.
Should we get that to the title company or somebody, or record it? I'm assuming it's recorded at the county already, right?
Yeah. There's a site plan that shows where the lines are. In fact, there's a property. What do they call those things that they pound into the ground? And
stake survey.
Yeah, it's in their driveway. So yeah, somebody back when decided they wanted a little extra property, I guess.
So we actually have a relatively current survey of that property, our property.
I'm quite certain it's
okay,
because the park board has looked into it. So that we need to work on also. Okay, so we're going to schedule a budget and finance meeting. Pete, do we want to schedule an extra one or can it wait till next month?
We'll do May.
Okay, so we'll go with the May meeting.
Yeah.
So we've given the Budget and Finance Committee that mandate. Anything else we need to talk about tonight? I guess everybody got the email about the speed sign for Moore Road. I guess maybe that's on the back burner now.
Is that Long Beach or Michigan City?
Half of the road is right on the border.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess that's something we need to talk about later. But if we're scraping for money, I don't know if now's going to be the time or not, but we can talk about that at a later date.
It's not really a problem anyway.
Okay.
Just by way of an update, Woodruff's down there today, and they're going to hopefully finish up tomorrow, and then we're going to try to get a paving outfit to fix the street, and we should be out of there within a week or so.
That's that area behind. That's the area behind Dr. Hauk's house.
Yeah, they're working on it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second. This is Nick.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And anybody who is watching and wasn't able to make a public comment because you've been muted, feel free to email me at lbp, that's in Long Beach Party LeMay, at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to get back to you. All right, everybody.
Thanks,
Bob.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Good night.